This is your co-host, Bettina Davelmar, and with me in studio is Michael Hart, the award-winning psychotherapist of Elim Counselling Services. Today's show is an interesting show. If you're a parent, you want to stay tuned in. Today's show is entitled 6 Strategies for Raising Successful Children. Maybe you're a parent today and you're thinking, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. Am I too hard? Am I too lenient in how I'm raising my children? I want them to be successful. Am I doing the right thing to raise these successful men and women? Welcome, Michael.
Thank you very much, Bettina. This is such a very important topic that we're covering today, because when we talk about 6 strategies for raising successful kids, we're talking about the future of our children. We're talking about the future of the human race. And I think healthy homes make a healthy world. And if we have healthy children, then we are having an influence on the future of society in general. So I think it's what we are going to be covering today is going to be very informative in giving you strategies. In the book of Proverbs chapter 22 verse 6, we are told to train up a child in the way he should go, and then when he's old, he will not depart from it. But there wasn't any instruction in following that verse as to exactly what it means. But the good news is that throughout scriptures, there are things that we can learn from, that we're going to be talking about some of those things today that will help you to set up your child for success in the future. In Deuteronomy 11, verse 18 to 19, we read these words. Fix these words of mine in your hearts and mind. Tie them as reminders on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Teach them to your children, speaking about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Write them on the doorpost of your houses and on your gates. So in this passage of scripture that I have just read, we hear God instructing the Israelites as to how they were to impart unto their children the truth of the word that they would live by. And some of those principles are going to be covered. Some of the principles that are hidden in this verse of scripture are going to be covered as we go through this show today.
So, okay, Michael, now people might be listening today and saying, yes, this is a show for me. I've got children. I want them to be these multimillionaires. This is success to them. Is this the kind of show that we're going to have today?
Unfortunately, I like that image. Little Johnny with the $5 million in his account, and mom and dad just get to retire at age 45 and just living in the sunny land of the Caribbean. That's not what we are talking about today. We're not talking about making little Johnny a multimillionaire or anything like that. So
of course,
I
if
hope
that happens,
my listeners are not disappointed
yes,
that we are not going to be talking about that. So I guess that's a good way to start, Bettina, by covering what is it that we mean by success. So I think success has, for me, raising successful children has 3 very important components. And I think the first component is that you want your children to be emotionally healthy children. And emotionally healthy in the sense that they are in touch with their own emotions and they're sensitive to the emotions of others. It doesn't matter how much money you have. If you're missing this ingredient of being emotionally healthy, then life for you become a nightmare.
Right.
And for people that you're living with, it becomes a living hell. And so we have so many clients who come in, they're living with narcissists who are just wrapped up in their own world, and they're concerned only about themselves and have no sensitivity to the emotional needs of their partner. So just to be clear, that first ingredient of being emotionally healthy, raising emotionally healthy children, is very important. And we're going to cover some points today that is going to show you how to do that. The second thing is that you need to have your children poised to become the best version of who God created them
Yes.
to be. And that is so important because we are talking about their gifts, their talents that God has given them at birth. And we want them to be able to maximize those potential. So this show that we're talking about today, 6 strategies for raising successful kids, is a way of helping you to pull out of your child what God has gifted them with. And then the third ingredient, when we're talking about success in the terms of this show, what we mean, the third important ingredient is responsible. We want to your kids by being successful. We mean kids who have this sense of responsibility. So the 3 ingredients again that embedded in this definition of success that we're talking about today is being emotionally healthy, 2, being poised to become the best version of themselves, and 3, becoming responsible.
And so, Michael, we're talking today about 6 strategies for raising successful kids. What is the first strategy?
The first strategy has to do with praise. And the first strategy I would title that use strategic praise. Strategic praise. And there are many scriptures in the Bible that speaks about encouraging one another unto good works. And I think that's a very important principle when it comes to developing successful children. We want to be able to encourage them. And so when we talk about strategic praise, what we are saying here, Bettina, is that not just every kind of praise is good enough.
Right.
Right? There's a specific type of praise that we are talking about here.
And so what are the types of praise that we would need? So how would we do this?
Okay, so by strategic praise, I'm drawing on research here that was done by Carol Dweck, and she is one of the world's leading researchers in the field of motivation. And she also has professorship at Columbia and Harvard University, and she has lectured around the world. And she has written a lot about how we can motivate children. And one of the things that she talks about in her work is the difference between fixed versus growth mindset. And she says that how we praise our kids will fall into one of these 2 categories, either a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. So a fixed mindset is when you praise kids by telling them that they're intelligent, or you're so smart, or you're so gifted. When you praise kids like that, it is a fixed mindset. And that is not something that is in their control. So when you give those kind of praise, when kids come upon things that are difficult, just knowing that they're intelligent and they're smart, if they fail at something, it might shatter that concept that they have of themselves, and they might not be willing to try difficult things because they don't want to be proven wrong that they're not really smart if they run into difficulties. So she said that a better way of praising children is the growth mindset, where you praise them for their effort. I can see that you did your best. I can see that you really prepared for this, and the mark that you got reflected that. So you see what we are doing here when we praise kids like that, we're giving them something that they can control.
Right.
They can control their effort. They can control being born smart. But if you start praising your kids for their effort that they put in, they are going to be motivated, according to Professor Carol Dweck, they're going to be motivated to keep trying harder and harder the next time. And the interesting thing about her studies, they've done studies with children as young as between 1 and 3 years old, and they have found that this strategy work for even kids that young. And so it's not surprising that many kids who grew up in school and was given this gifted label oftentimes don't reach their full potential. And
right.
surprisingly, I see many of these kids in life that many of these kids that come into my practice who in life today they are not doing well, and they say, I was the gifted child, but at a certain point I just stopped trying when things became harder, because they were praised for their giftedness, they weren't praised for their effort. And so it's important to have this growth mindset, develop this growth mindset in your children by praising them for their effort.
Michael, this is so very interesting. You talk about control. And so the next point is quite interesting. We were talking, Michael, off the air about emotions, modeling and teaching this, and control. That there must be an element of control there too, knowing how to control your emotions and things
Absolutely.
such.
Absolutely. What is funny is that many parents want to teach their children to be able to regulate their emotions, but they don't demonstrate it in the home. So children learn by not just what we tell them, but by how we live our lives and the environment that they're in. So when God says in Deuteronomy 11 verse 18 to 19 that we are to write them on the doorposts of our home, that's another way of saying when kids enter the household, the very essence of what's going on, the very atmosphere in the household is something that is teaching them. When they go through the door, they enter under the word, under the influence of the word. So the doorpost, writing that on the doorpost could be a way of saying your home should be a place where you are modeling what it is that you want to teach your children. And so the second point that we're talking about here is that you need to model and teach emotional awareness. And we talk about that being an ingredient in success earlier on when we define success.
And so we spoke about the first strategy, using strategic praise. I love that one, Michael. And then the second one, modeling and teaching emotional awareness. Now, would you agree, Michael, that children need aspirations, need goals? They need to know where they're going, knowing their purpose in life. Is that something that you would agree
Absolutely.
with?
So when we teach emotional awareness, one way in which we do that is by speaking about our own feelings. And one of the things that we can do when it comes to helping kids prepare for the future, it's a third point of helping them to dream and develop an imagination as to what their future could be like. We see this principle throughout the Bible. Jesus again and again prepared the disciples for what was ahead by telling them what was ahead. And so we see also, if we look at how Jesus dealt with Peter when he was failing, and Jesus knew that Peter would deny him. Jesus was telling Peter that, Peter, I have a dream for you. I have a vision of who you're going to become. I see this vision of you that are going to, you're going to go through some struggles, but I have this vision that you're going to come back and you're going to be stronger and you're going to be an influence on others. So I think it is very important for us to develop this dream in our kids where we set high expectation. We tell them our vision that we have for them of the future. And by this, I don't mean that you're telling your children that you're going to be a doctor or you want them to be a
Right.
lawyer or anything like that,
Dictating what
right?
you want
Dictating
them
what you want
to
them to
be.
be. So when we
Right.
talked about success, I said it means the best version of who God created them to be, given
Yes.
their talents and their skills.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a way we can do that where we help kids to realize that we're encouraging them. We're encouraging them to have a vision of their future, that they can be anything that they want to be if they put the effort into it. And
Right.
so it's very important for us to do that. So there are actually studies that have been done about this, and I like to refer to these studies because it means that we are not just saying things off the
Right.
top of
It's
our head, right?
actually
But it's actually backed up
proven. Right.
by researchers. So there was a study that was done with 15,000 girls aged 13 to 14, and they followed these girls for a 10-year period. And what the studies found, the studies was done, research that was led by PhD candidate Erica Rascon Ramirez. Ramirez, I think that's the way you pronounce it.
Yes.
You pronounce it. And so this study that was done at the University of Essex showed that the girls who had mothers that consistently told these girls of their expectation of them and what they desired for them and had dreams for these girls' future, that the girls who had mothers like that they did significantly better than homes in which there were no
Wow.
expectations
So
for these
interesting.
girls. And one of the things that they said is that this is really very profound, and I think it's very interesting but also very exciting,
Yes.
because just by having expectation and dreams for your kids, it had an influence on them according to this research. And the influence was just not in the area of producing girls who were going to be multimillionaires or got
Right.
straight A in universities. What the research shows is that these girls were less likely to become pregnant as teenagers. They were more likely to attend college. They were less likely to get stuck in dead-end low-wage jobs, and they were less likely to have prolonged periods of unemployment. So just the expectation of the parent, just the dream that these parents had, these mothers in particular in this study had of their daughters, determined their level of success.
I am enjoying this show as co-host. I mean, I have a 9-year-old and I'm thinking, you know what? I'm going to be using some of these strategies. I believe I'm using some of them, but there's some that I'm seeing here that quite interesting. Before we go to point number 4, now we're at 3, help them to dream. Would it be that we would have to have short-term goals or long-term goals, or
Yes, I think
both?
we need to have both, because a lot of times when we think about setting expectation for our kids, we might think about, okay, what I want you to be when you graduate from university, or what kind of profession later on in life. But
Mm-hmm.
in terms of goals for children, what we need to think about also is short-term goals. Like, what
Right.
are your expectations for your child
Wow.
for this semester
Right.
coming up, or for this exam that they have coming up,
Exactly.
and making sure that you're involved in their life. It's not just enough to have expectation and say, okay, you can do it, and leave the kids alone, but it also calls for involvement and monitoring of your kids' activities to help them be the best version of themselves, because left to their own devices, most children, I should say, are more likely to go for fun activities. But what this
Mm-hmm.
study also showed, Bettina, is that a lot of these girls who were successful, they said they didn't like their mother's involvement in their lives. They actually said they found their mothers nagging,
Right.
but they were thankful for it later on in adult life, when they realized that it was for their own good. So don't try to become your children's friend. You have to
Right.
be a parent, and sometimes being a parent means having these expectations and sticking to these expectations.
Michael, I really like what you just said. Don't try and be your child's friend. And I think a lot of parents, we try and do that just to be able to connect with our children, but it's very important that we take that active parent role,
Yes.
and we train our children. Yes, we are their friend, but most of all, we are their shepherd. We are their their mother, their father. And so it's funny, we're talking about all these things that need to be done. What about number 4? Number 4 is quite interesting.
The fourth point is to practice interactive reading. There have been numerous studies that have been done that show that students who are exposed to reading before preschool are more likely to do well when they reach their period of formal education. But it's not just any kind of reading. You know,
Right.
that kind of reading when you're tired and you just want to get the Bible story out of the way and you're just saying, you know, instead of reading the full story of Joseph, you might just read 3 verses and say, well, I've done my reading for the night.
Yeah.
It's not that kind of reading. By interactive reading, we are talking about reading where you involve the child in the story. You read the story, you talk about the child to the child about what would you do if you were in Joseph's position, like how do you think Joseph feels. So you're helping the child to understand the story when you do that, and you're developing their imagination and you're helping them to comprehend the story. And as they go through school, they're much more likely to be able to do that when
That's
they
right.
have other stories to read as well. So this practice of interactive reading, we could say a lot more about this, but just in a nutshell, that's what it is. You can stop and ask questions about the story as well as you go along.
Practicing interactive reading. That sounds like a lot of fun, Michael, for both parent and child. Which is strategy number 5?
The fifth strategy is to promote outdoor play. A study has been done with boys, 153 boys aged 6 to 8, and what they found is that the boys who spent time outdoor had educational gain as a result. So these physical activities that they did actually influenced their creativity, their ability to pay attention, and led to them having better marks in math, for example, and academically in general. So that's no surprise to me, right? Because if you have a healthy body, you tend to have a healthy mind. And I think a lot of our children today spend way too much time in front of the screen.
I agree.
And they are missing out on their ability to understand their environment and to expand their minds and to become curious about life in general. And I think this study is showing that we need to spend time with our kids outdoor. So that's point number 5.
Number 6.
The sixth point is to teach, the sixth and final point is to teach responsibility.
Yes.
Lithcott Ains cites the Harvard Grant study of a famous 81-year-old longitudinal study in which he found that people generally need 2 things to be successful in life. And this study, she said these 2 things that we need to be successful in life. The first is love, and the second is a work ethic. So we need to teach our children the responsibility, the responsible habit of doing things, of doing chores, for example, because this is a skill that they're going to need later in life. They don't know that people can depend on them to do tasks and that they have a responsibility to others and to themselves to be involved in doing things. And I think it's sad that in many of our homes today, the kids today have no responsibility, no chores, or very little chores. And I think we are missing an opportunity to teach our children responsibility. And so, Bettina, I see that we have quickly come to the end of today's show. So
Yes.
I think it was fun doing this
It
show
was
with you.
really fun.
These 6 strategies, and I think we have covered some very practical points.
Absolutely.
And we have backed it up with scriptures for the most part, and with psychological studies that show what we are talking about here is not just something that we thought of. And so if you missed any of these 6 strategies, remember that you can find this by going to our website at elimcounselingministry.com, where you can listen to the full podcast. Elim is spelled Elim, counseling with two L's, ministry.com. And there are over 200 other shows there that you can listen to. Our videos cover a number of different topics: mental health issues, parenting issues, couple related issues, and it's all free of cost online. So you can go to our YouTube channel by accessing our website and just clicking on the YouTube icon, and it will take you to the video and the podcast resource on YouTube. Remember too that we are a non-profit organization, so we strive to continue to provide counseling at a subsidized rate for those who need it but can't be able to afford it. And so you can support us by making a donation through any of the means on our website. But for your convenience, you can also directly support us through our crowdfunding platform at patreon.com/Elim Counseling. Patreon is spelled Patreon, patreon.com/Elim Counseling Services. And you can make a contribution for as little as $5 monthly. So again, we want to thank you so much for being with us on air this morning, and want to remind you that we're on the air every Monday morning at 9:30. So please do join us next week when we will have another interesting show lined up for you. So until next time, this is your host, Michael Hart of Elim Counseling Services, praying that God would bless you in all your relationships and keep you sound in mind and pure in heart.